Okay, so we were on 1913. Havuz la'aviv ben ksil v'delef tored midyani isha. We translated it as a ksil son is a either so Havuz is either a heartbreak, that's the Mitzvah, destruction, that is I think just the word Havuz. Oh, that was the dictionary, right? Enduring ruin, right? Engulfing ruin, sorry, engulfing ruin. And then bashing, which is sadigon, that's make upega, like bashing and wounding to his father. The Delef Tored and Midyani Isha. And so this one, all the English translations did not have a literal translation. It was Midyani Isha, they either they translate it as like a nagging woman or a woman's nagging or a woman's bickering, but we're not exactly sure what it is Delef Tored. So they all translate it as an annoying drip or an irksome drip. Tored, according to Mr. Stian, means it drives you out. So something that drives you out of the house. And then we had the Targum Ksubim, which we were kind of ignoring, that it's, he says Havuz is sour wine, which we don't know what that is. Okay, so our questions were, what is the relationship between the two halves of the pasuk? Is it comparing them? Are they opposites? Is it saying they're the same? Is one to a higher degree than another? We said that the context or the subject realm seems good, which is seems identifiable, which is it's bad familial midos and how they impact you, like bad midos of your wife and son. But we don't really know what the relationship between the two is. What is ben ksil in this context? So meaning what is a ksil, and then why ben? Question 3, the first half seems mishleically obvious, meaning that obviously you don't want to have a son who's a ksil because ksil are bad throughout Mishlei. 4, the second half seems experientially obvious. We know what it's like to have an annoying nagging in your life. 5, what is the practical advice? Is this marriage/parenting advice, or is there something else here? 6, is it only using Midyani Isha as the common example based on the audience of Mishlei, meaning a nagging wife, but it could equally apply to a nagging husband if the student of Mishlei is a woman, or is there something specific about the dynamics of wife husband or woman man, like that is that makes this unique? Or you can even ask, like, what if you have like a nagging son or daughter? Like, is it any person in the household who's nagging? Those things, those are also personality types. Or a nagging parent, right? Like how does the son relate to this woman who's the Isha here? What?
No.
Oh, okay. 7, what is the comparison to the Delef Tored? What is that mashal? 8, what does Midyani Isha mean? 9, what does Havuz mean?
Also, just looking at it in one, it seems like for the Isha, like you can pick who your wife is.
Yeah.
And so like I can see how it's being.
Yeah.
Then like you can't pick for your son.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so that would seem to indicate that, or that's a check mark against the possibility that this is talking about like decisions to get into these relationships. I guess the closest thing you could do though is in parenting, you can't guarantee that your son's not going to turn out to be a ksil, but like you can parent in a way that maximizes chances of your son being a chacham, and like you can be a mishleically neglectful parent and like not supervise your kid's development, and like he'll turn out a ksil. So in that sense, there is a choice. But yeah, you're right. You can't like guarantee it. Yeah. Okay. So then, what did we say yesterday? So we said, first of all, we said ksil here seems to be generic, not a technical definition of ksil, because it seems like however you define ksil, then it's going to be bad for the father. So there's nothing in the pasuk forcing us to say this is talking about a specific type of foolishness. So as far as we're concerned, this would seem to apply to a ksil, an avil, a pesi, any type of mishleic fool. And generic definition of mishleic fool, Rabbeinu Yonah gave someone who makes decisions, who does averos and makes decisions to satisfy their desires. Okay, so like not IQ foolishness or like intelligence, but decision making.
It's possible just in terms of in your irrigation.
Yeah.
Could that possibly be that like dripping that gets you like sentiment, like the woman is going to be divorced?
So I don't think he means divorce, even though that is the word we use for divorce, because he's explaining the mushal, right? Now, you could say maybe that like you're gonna want to divorce her, but I don't think the pasuk is. That's not how the pasuk is using the word. I mean, again, in other words, if that idea is in there, if the idea of divorce is in there, it's there as an association, not as what it's telling you to do. And that brings up a point also, is that when I was looking at the Mafar from this morning, I realized, I mentioned yesterday that like the dripping has an annoying, like there's the annoyance of the dripping, but then there's the functionality of the dripping, and that it's an actual indication of like harm as opposed to a ticking of a clock, So what I was thinking is, I'm pretty sure this is like a leaky roof. We're not talking about like one drip. We're talking about like a roof that's leaking, because as we'll see when we look at the farm today, a lot of them say like it drives the B'nai Bais out of the house. So like one drip is not going to drive you out of the house, but if the roof is leaking, then you can't live there, Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. Let's look at Rabbeinu Yonah and Meiri and start off from there, because their approaches were the most similar to lines of thinking we were saying yesterday, but they do argue. Okay, so let me just share that on the screen, and then we'll develop it from there. All right, what page? Is that what it is? No responses. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Tough kuflam. Okay. Rabbeinu Yonah on the left side in the middle-ish, or actually towards the middle bottom. Then we go to the other side. Havus Aviv ben Ksiel v'delef Torah Midyani Isha. From page. Midyani Isha yareu leish min haben haksiel. So she's worse than the ben Ksiel. She'll harm him, or I don't know if yareu is harm or pain, okay, but will harm you or pain you more than the ben Ksiel. Probably pain, because her annoyance is not really harming you. The leaky roof would, but her nag. I mean, maybe you can say it's harming you. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm saying that that's gonna. Like, what's the raw? It's either going to be psychological or like practical, or both. Im rov sicho v'ka'aso al haben aksil, because despite, or I'm gonna say despite and see if that works out. Despite the great your abundant conversation and anger, I don't know what sicho is over the foolish son. Ain kaso torios ami beso. That anger will not drive you out of the house. Okay, it will not drive the father out of the house. Aval midyani isha tordim ha'if mi beso. But the contentiousness of the wife will drive a person out of the house. Kilo tuchal hada'as lahachil devareha umirivasa. Here's yet another. We should have kept the score from the beginning of the year, when das means psyche, not intellect, because this is clearly not intellect. That it's not his intellect cannot tolerate her words and contentiousness. It's his mind, his peace of mind, cannot tolerate her words and her contentiousness. Like a dripping that drives a guy out of the house. And he cannot tolerate living there, but while it's still dripping. What is this footnote here? Footnote 28 says the kisve yad something. I don't know what the samach stands for here. I assume if it's kisve yad, then it means that it's Rabbeinu Yonah, but I just don't know like what the addition is. So and I have no idea if this is relevant. I just saw this now. The foolish son to his father is like havus and shvarim, like bashing and breaking. Mirov kaso, because of his abundant anger, viagono al roa inyanav, and his like despondency or depression over the badness of his affairs, of the son's affairs. Well, ain kaso toridos beso, but his anger doesn't drive him from his house. Well, midyani isha torimos beso lo sucho hadas lahafel devrahel mirivasa kamo adela asher torid ha'adamina bias lo yuchol ladorbo the ochid loaf. All right, fine. So that's the last part's essentially the same. Yeah. So what is he saying here? So I mean, definitely he's saying that the son is not as bad as the isha, but the question is, what is the difference? And he's saying the difference is that the son doesn't drive you out of the house, whereas she does. But why? Yeah.
Well, I think that maybe with his wife, he feels situations like more under his control, and so it pains him more that it can't happen, and so he needs to leave, and then he's got out, and maybe he didn't come back until at work, so we have to stuff solved.
Yeah.
Whereas for the son, there's like what that it's not necessarily totally under control, like they don't do so much, and it just is what it is.
Okay, so I like the distinction. Let's talk about whether it plays out. So what makes the woman more in the control than the son? Because I would think the other way. I would think that the son is under the, I mean, I guess we haven't really said what is the age of the son. Seems to not, I mean, I'm inclined to say it doesn't matter. I'm inclined to say that like any son who's still dependent on the father, who's like living in the home, whether he's like 10 or 20, like it shouldn't matter. But the son is like under the influence of the father, theoretically, like that's his place. Whereas the Isha is more of an equal. And like you, in other words, in his mind, you would think that she is more of she's her own person. Whereas the son, like, no, I have a responsibility to like parent him and to like oversee his stuff.
I would be different though.
Okay, sure. But before we say the difference, I was just saying, so the way the two options that you have now on the table are either try to explain this distinction, or your distinction is good, but you got the sides reversed, and then try to explain that. Yeah.
So I think with the first son, the pain is of a parent seeing their son make stupid decisions and not being able to help them or get them to one. It's not like not being able to get them to make the decisions.
Yeah.
Where I think it's like this coming after the husband.
Yeah.
So it's not so like choose not to be like thinking about the son or anything, but once you just like
yeah.
It's free up when you least expect it.
Yeah, he knocks on his door when he comes home from work. Honey, anyone home? He sneaks into the kitchen and boom, she gets him. yeah. Oh, I just realized. Oh man, I just realized I didn't plug in my mic, but I feel like sometimes when I plug it in, then it goes mute, and I'm not gonna bother. Whatever. Anyway, yeah, it's the brain fog. If when you were describing it, I concretized it as one term. So tell me if this is different or the same. That there's an element of victimization with the wife that doesn't exist by the son, meaning he's the target of her nagging, whereas the son, like, it disappoints you. Like the son disappoints you, but like it's not like he's coming after you. He's just being a gambler, a drunkard, loser, thief, whatever his thing is, a bum, and it affects you because of your your hopes for him, or like the financial burden, or So I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't affect you at all. I'm saying that it's not targeted. Yeah.
It's much like a byproduct of his being the son's action.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing, yeah.
No, like just because you want good for him.
Yeah. Okay. So that actually brings us into the Meiri, okay, which we'll get to in 1 second, because I want to play Rabbeinu off of the Meiri. But it is interesting then that if this is true, it still describes them in opposite ways, because the dripping doesn't target you, but the bashing does.
Yeah.
And if we take the Rabbeinu Yonah footnote, which again I'm assuming is Rabbeinu Yonah, he does say it's havus, not heartbreak, but breakages, like breaking strikes, So that's not a refutation of the idea, but I think that's a nuance we would have to explain, because that's like the whole muscle.
Yeah, I guess that's highlighting the fact that it will. I think
Okay, I just
I have an idea on that.
Sure, I do
It could
too.
be that it's stopped by doing it with, and it's trying to like show you, like, you would think maybe that, like, oh, this is just, he's not teaching me, so like no big deal, like I'll just ignore that.
Yeah.
Like it's painful, but like I'll just ignore it. But like it's saying like, no, that's actually like that's something to like focus on, I guess, and like deal with, because like it's it you have to view it as like harmful.
Okay, so can we then merge the two ideas, meaning the first step we took was the nature of the pain. And then you're saying that the reason why it uses these mishalim, which don't correspond to the nature of the pain, is it's suggesting how you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I just want to throw one thing out on the table also for a distinction. And I don't know if this is what I'm about to say. I don't know if it is a new idea or if it's an answer to this specific question, which we can then apply. But if you think about the nature of the son's harmful effect on the father, if you're talking about the effects of his decision making, then it will come to you as in episodes, like he crashed the car, or like he lost his money in he was in debt, like it's gonna be like specific disasters that his foolishness brings about. Whereas the Isha, it's a constancy, it's a constant thing. She's constantly nagging, Yeah. Were you saying something? I thought I saw a hand, a flick of the wrist.
Yeah, they did it.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's read the Meiri. Put Rabbeinu Yonah on, not on the back burner, but on the side burner, and then do the Meiri just to compare. So the Meiri starts on the previous page, I think. Nope, it doesn't. Just the Dibur Moscow. Okay, Meiri says, right column, second from the top, second from the bottom. Havus pirush inyan shever. So his first explanation is that havus, it means breaking, singular. Amar shehabein haksiel shever v'yagon la'aviv. So saying that the foolish son is a breaking and a source of depression or anguish to his father. B'hachzavas tochalto, in terms of not fulfilling his hopes. Okay, so a letdown type of breaking, not a like decision-making consequences type of breaking. Okay, and that's an idiom, by the way. Hachzavas tochalto, tochel is his hope, and hachzava, it comes from kazav, which literally means like falsification of his hope, but it means like your hopes don't come to fruition. The Amar Havuos, so it says plural, lashon rabim in plural. Ki yichav bo nafsho v'gufa. Okay, maybe I retract, because his pain and his body, sorry, his soul and his body will be pained. So meaning, yeah. So so I do retract that. So I'm just talking about both cases. Shahaya miyachal mimenu hatzlacha benafsho uvekinyanim, because the father hoped for his son to have success. Oh, I don't know. Let's see. Success bin nafsho uvekinyanim. Never mind. Success in his soul, meaning in his son's soul and in his son's possessions. In other words, a father wants for a son material success, but then also like to be like a good person, to be a perfected person, to be whatever hatzlacha hanefesh is that you say here. Yeah, and body. I would have said that if not for the fact that it says kinyanim. So it sounds like when he says gufo, he just means like material possessions. I mean, the father does want the son to be healthy, but I don't think that's how the Meiri is taking gufo.
It also said nefesh in guf, and then it said nefesh in kinyan.
Right. Yeah, right. And also the Meiri is cognizant of the Rambam's 4 categories of perfection of possessions, body, midos, and mind. He quotes that in his either Hakdama or in the beginning of Mishlei. So like if he says kinyanim, I'm assuming he means kinyanim as opposed to body.
Why is he leaving out?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because that's another thing the person have like hopes about.
Yeah. V'ha isha hara'a balas merigos umijanim, and the woman who is bad, who is a mistress of conflict. No, I mean balas, meaning she has a lot of contentiousness and quarrels. Ikdelaptorid is like a driving drip. Or it's a little more matria. Oh, sorry, not driving. He says differently. Or it's a little more matria balabais bahasmada. So Toraid can mean to drive you out, like the Mitzvah said, but tirda can also mean like preoccupation or like burden, So she is matriach the ball bias with constancy. Okay. Talmud. Okay, that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say I didn't realize that was Hebrew from the Torah, but it's not. It's lashon Talmud. Tirda shekoin with toreach be'eze inyan below hefsek tarid. Right, tarid b'machshavosav, tarid b'nachasav. So they call someone who's busy with something without any break, tarid. Okay, so that's one interpretation. Okay, and he gives another one. The Yesh Mefarshim Tored Megarish. Okay, some, like the Mitzvah Zion, say Tored is Megarish, is driving out. Klomer Kamosha Delef Megarish Adami Beso, Kain Midyani Isha. Just like the dripping drives a person out of his house, so too the contentiousness of a woman. The Tored Lashon Targum, and Tored is Aramaic, mean Anasha Lach Tardech from Daniel. Okay, now he's going to contrast the two. Ulapir Harishon, according to the first explanation, that Tored means preoccupation. Loazim also Kamo Matriach Unglit. I don't know what that is. Oh no, do I not have the I don't have another page. I gotta get the sorry. I gotta make this one. I think that's what we ran out. Right, we ran out. The next thing's the Rabag. Yeah. The last page is the Rabag. Okay, I'll have to make new copies for next week. Hold on. I don't think it's that much more. And according to the second interpretation, it's like driving out. All of this is telling you to guard yourself from her, like you guard yourself from a venomous snake. Yeah. Okay. So now let's compare and contrast Rabbeinu Yonah with the Meiri here. So Rabbeinu Yonah. First of all, Rabbeinu Yonah. So what are the differences between Rabbeinu Yonah and Meiri? And I don't know if the ideas are mutually exclusive. I'm just saying, like, they're definitely interpreting the pasuk differently.
Well, Meiri is definitely taking it as like it kind of widens the difference between the two, because for the then it's not like a pain as much as like losing. I mean, I guess there is pain, but it's like the pain comes from like a crush expectation.
Yeah.
Like you thought you were gonna have a good, and
Yeah.
you lost it. And
Yeah.
that's pain as opposed to the Isha, where it's actually like keep bothering you.
Right. So according to Meiri, they're both psychological pains, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously all pain is psychological, but what I mean is like this idea that we were saying before about the actual consequences does not enter at all into the Meiri, whereas Rabbeinu Yonah's interpretation can tolerate it. I don't know if he's saying it, but it can tolerate it. So he's saying that with the son, it's lost hopes, and with the woman, it's constancy. And the pasuk is not, and the other difference is the pasuk, according to the Meiri, is not saying one is worse than the other. It's saying that they're both bad, but in different ways. Whereas
Rabbeinu Yonah is saying,
he's saying that the wife is worse than the kid, because the kid, as angry as he makes you, will not drive you out of your house, but the Isha will. Which also makes it sound like Rabbeinu Yonah is placing much more emphasis on the driving out of the house than the Meiri. Rabbeinu Yonah is saying that that's the whole idea, is that while the son doesn't drive you out of the house, the woman will. And Meiri, it's just like the son has the type of annoyance that makes you sad, and the wife has the type of annoyance that drives you out of the house. It's just a comparison.
maybe Rabbeinu Yonah is trying to bring more to the son by stressing his point about how the woman's going to drive you out of the house. As we can see, because of the constancy of her nagging, right? That like it's never not to be on his mind. It's not like
Yeah.
on his mind. It's just that she's
Ooh,
constantly
yeah,
nagging him.
yeah.
Whereas with the son, when something happens, he might forget a little bit and not really think about where his son's at or what his son's
Yeah.
doing. And so we're saying because this is going to be the thing, like you need to remember about the son too, and
Yeah.
maybe focus on that and try to nagging, or whatever, leave the house and think about the son or whatever.
Right. So this is an interesting thing with the constancy that I had not thought about, which is that she becomes a voice in your head.
Right.
Whereas I feel like with a son, I mean, obviously you're aware of your son's success, at all times, but like, it's like it's going to manifest as more like a stimulus, like you said, like when the son makes a bad decision, or like when you encounter the son. But like for her, her nagging is a feature of the household. Like the son does not become a feature of the household. The son is an inhabitant in the house, that like when you are, see, this is why I'm inclined to think it's much more when he messes up. When he screws up, then you have to deal with the consequences. Because then I guess I'm being sold on my idea that it's like bashing, like make and pega, like Sadia said. Whereas she, it's constant. So there's the like she ruins the atmosphere in how, like the expression that people use, in relationships is like, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. And what that means is even when there is no nagging, then there's the potential for nagging, and then that makes you like have to like, tiptoe around, Everybody says, oh yeah, yeah. Or were you just expressing agreement? I just heard a sound emanate from behind mask.
I have I have like a semi different point.
Okay, so then Avi, you go first.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that I think like what you were saying that like with the nagging wife it becomes like a voice in his head.
Yeah.
Meaning like it becomes just like in his daily life, just like a feature, right? That like as he experiences his daily mundane things, he's thinking about, well, how is this gonna play out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas for the son, it's specific to things even more so. I think like even if the son doesn't do something, they're probably like if the husband like sees a certain thing or like remembers a certain situation that happened, it'll be something that'll like trigger.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sad for my son. I remember that time he crashed his car. Wow,
Yeah.
It's awful. I hope he's doing okay right now.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be like he's always thinking.
Yeah. In fact, you know what it's like? I'm not saying that this is shot, but you know what it's like? It's like sour wine. The sour wine doesn't bother you until you drink it. Meaning it's a stimulus based. When you interface with it, then that's when the pain comes up. So, and I'm using this vague word interface because we don't exactly like. It could be when he thinks of the sun. It could be when he encounters the sun. It could be when the sun doesn't screws up. But like the problem is in the sun. But with the wife, the problem is in the household and in his head. Yeah. And so that's the thing I'm not sure about because, I am sure that it does affect his decisions. I'm not sure that the pasuk is focusing on that. Meaning that you can conceive of a pasuk that would talk about how she actually impairs his success or like makes him, lose stuff. Like, here's an example of a pasuk like that. In 14:1 is Chachmos Nashim Bansa Besa V'ivelas Biadeha Tehersana, I think, or something like that, which is the wise among women builds her house, but the foolish one tears down her house with her own hands. So that's like her behavior affects the household or affects him, or let's say like we take Ashes Chayil and you reverse all the psukim, then you end up like, say like Batach ba leif bala, Vishala lo yachzar. So her husband's heart trusts in her and he will never lack profit. But with a foolish woman, he can't trust her and his house will like lose money. So like I feel like if that were the idea of like the effects of her nagging on his decisions or on the household economy or on her decisions, it would have said some clue about it. But that's in the mushal, but for the annoyance, right? I mean,
well, it doesn't get driven out.
I'm not disagreeing with your idea. I'm saying that like the quality of the dripping roof that Mitsuda Sion is saying the pasuk is talking about is it drives you out, not that it. I mean, we said earlier that it damage in the house, but he's saying it drives you out. That's the quality we're focusing on. So I feel like any idea that we have that has to be primary, and like if we put the emphasis on it harms him, then the driving out is not primary in my mind. I mean, I'm not saying I can't be sold on it either. Like that's just where I'm holding right now. And then the same thing with matriach. Matriach is it's always on his mind. I think the matriach points to the constancy also that he's tarried. It's without he's preoccupied with it. Yeah, and that's the thing also. Just to talk about about houses for 1 second. You want to come home and like withdraw from all of your problems that you face in the outside world. Like when you're working, you have to be involved with like arrogant, busy, egotistical people, and then you come home and you're like, okay, now I can like unwind, And if that sanctuary has been tainted by contentious dripping, then you want to stay at work, yeah, or go to the bar, right, and become the seal, yeah. Well, so you had a separate idea for a separate insight point.
In terms of like one of the things that's bothering me about the pasuk is the
Oh yes, we didn't talk about that. Yeah.
because it seems very not.
Yeah.
Especially the first time.
Yeah.
But I think we were saying about how especially like with Rabbeinu Yonah, it's not is that it's using the bank skill to teach you something about the Isha. And then you can say that really it's like Isha.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're right. Rabbeinu Yonah lends itself much more to, and this is kind of related to what Avi was observing before, that you can choose, or you choose a wife. Zev, Avi, I don't remember. Yeah, whatever. That you can choose a wife, but you can't choose how your son turns out. So according to Rabbeinu Yonah, that's the point of the pasuk, and the ben's only there as contrast. I'm fine with the idea that the first half is also within your choice insofar as how you parent. It's just not, you can't control the results in the same way as you can with who you marry. And I'm fine with that because clearly one of the main themes in Mishlei is parenting and like the consequences of bad parenting. That it's one thing if you have a consequence that, like, in other words, this was the first pasuk we did in chapter 10, right? Is that like, you know, if you ask the average parent, why should you be a good parent? They'll say, because I want my son to turn out to be a good man, you know, and they'll say it in that voice. But what Mishlei is saying is, no. If your son turns out to be a ben ksil, you will suffer. You know, so don't think that you can just like, you know, neglect your parenting duties in terms of raising a ben chacham and like, it's his problem. No. It's going to be your problem because you're going to be upset and angry, and it's going to be like bashing. And if we're right about the it's funny, the Meiri doesn't say this, but like, if the son is not being masliach in his kinyanim, practically speaking, in many cases, the father's going to have to like somehow like support him or bail him out. Like the father's not going to just. I mean, it's a rare father who will say, "You're on your own, kid, and if you're on the streets, I just won't help you." You know, so like you know, it's or at least even if the father doesn't help the kid, he'll feel guilty or he'll feel pressured. It's you know, so your son's material success will also impact your happiness. So that is something that's within the person's choice.
Yeah. I feel like if that was like the focus of the pasuk. It seems like a repetition of the.
I don't think so, because I think that the contextualizing of both these ideas in one pasuk shows that
I guess it's in frame of your household is going to be given.
Yeah, and it has to do with the mitos of the members of your household. And I think it's very easy for a person to fall into the trap, especially like in with a chacham. Like the more of a chacham you are, the more you realize how little you can control other people's behavior. So there's going to be a tendency towards not towards like, I'm going to worry about my own, you know, perfection and like let them worry about theirs. And first of all, that's not rational, because insofar as you are a chacham and have the ability to like guide people, then you should. But also because it does affect you, and it's going to make you miserable if you make the wrong choices in parenting or the wrong choices in you know, in marriage, you know. Yeah.
It's a very fine line, because then once you get involved, you have to remind yourself that you don't need to, you can't have to change a person.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, and like in both cases, there are points of no return with an asterisk, meaning once you get married, then you're stuck with her. Now the caveat is you can divorce her, but that's just not so simple. Like you know, like there are plenty of people who are stuck in unhappy marriages for a variety of reasons. And I just thought I was listening to a podcast the other day, yesterday, and it mentioned, I didn't even think about this. So I had heard, and I don't know the statistics. So I heard that divorce rates shot through the roof during the pandemic, which makes sense because you're stuck with your spouse and your family for this whole time. But what I didn't think of is that the courts are backed up. So like, I mean, again, I don't know the particulars, but like it's not so easy necessarily, or let's say like it's not so easy to just say like, boom, just divorce instantaneously, you know. And also just the complications of real life, like you have kids, like they have to live places, you know, like it's not so easy. So that's like, once you get, so the practical advice applies before you get married. You know, don't marry an Isha Midyanim, an Isha, whatever, Isha's Midyanim. And then with the son, the point of no return is there is a certain point, there's a window of opportunity where you can influence the kid's moral development. And beyond that window, like it's very hard to change the kid. So however you say that window is, if you're going to go Freudian and say it's like much smaller window, if you're going to say there's like a whatever, like there's different windows, but you can't let that pass. And once you get past that, you're stuck in the sense that you can't change the person, and then the only thing you're going to be able to do is like avoid the stimulus, just like you could just never go home and like have a separate rooms in the house, or like make a fort, yeah, it's just not gonna be pretty. Yeah. Does Rashi say this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu? No. He takes it literally. Let's just skim and see if there's anyone else that says anything interesting. It's just David.
It actually doesn't look really good.
Oh, it doesn't? Oh.
He's explaining
what the pshat is? Oh, okay. Does Mrs. David say anything? Yeah, Havus Ben Ksil, bottom right on the first page, I think. Ben Ksil Yisabiv Havus La'aviv. The foolish son will bring about heartbreak. So he said heartbreaks to his father. Videlef, Kamot Tipos Hamatar, like the drips of rain. Hadolef Latok Habayis, which drip into the house. Asher Yatrit Espene Habayis Lalechas Mimena, which caused the members of the house to leave from it. Kain Merivas Haisha Yatrit Es Ba'alal Hizrachik Mimena. Okay, that's just explaining the pshat, which can fit into either of the interpretations. Yeah.
So here like is this
Oh yes, thanks for reminding me. Right. Yeah. So if you are addressing yourself to a chachama, and she is in a relationship with a man who is a nagging personality, so then would the same thing apply? Seems like it, right? Yeah. Just any person in your house, or even a kid, or even a parent, any person in your house that
providing like repeated negative stimulus.
Right. Then it's going to have this phenomenon. The only difference would be in terms of the amount of agency you have in making the choice. So let's say like in this society, then who a woman marries is pretty much the same level of agency as who a man marries. But let's say like in a more ancient time, she might not have much of a choice. Or let's say it's a nagging parent, you can't choose your parent, or anything like that. Yeah.
And then I guess also there's just like difference between men and women.
Yeah.
I think that
yeah. I mean, I
probably some kind of subtle difference.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the fact that people now talk about mansplaining, that seems to be the uniquely male version of nagging, right? At least in terms of the way that women experience it. Like no men ever accuse women of womansplaining. They accuse them of nagging.
What is
Mansplaining is
it's just when you like overexplain.
Because it's a woman. Like in other words, like the litmus test they say is if you would go into depth in like a patronizing way to explain stuff to a woman colleague, and that you wouldn't do for a man colleague, then that's like perceived by women as mansplaining. Yeah. There's one more thing I was going to say. Oh yeah. This could even apply to a nagging boss, in terms of not your household, but in terms of your workplace. The phenomenon of the nagging thing. Obviously now that's even more, I mean, that's not the pasuk, but that's like in terms of the same way that when you are choosing a spouse, you have to consider, is this person a nagger, and what impact is that gonna have on the environment that I spend X amount of hours a day in? So too, when you're choosing a workplace, it might be an excellent job, but if your boss is a nagger or a hoverer, or I don't know what the other terms are they use for a boss, and is like micromanager, that's the term I guess, but the manager, right? If your boss is a micromanager and your personality can't tolerate that, so then it might be the best job in the world, but you're gonna be miserable, every day when you go to work.
It's also a lot easier to change jobs than to change.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's the Japanese.
You want to know what the derech nistar is? I was reading it and I couldn't figure it out. And we don't have it in. Oh, sorry, you have it. Yeah. Sorry, you guys don't have it in your packet. Derech nistar is the Meiri's application. Yes. The Meiri's application of the same idea to the world of intellectual perfection as opposed to decision-making perfection. Yeah. So here's what he says. Found it interesting to think about. He says, so a psyche, when he says Homer, he means body/psyche. So like a disposition, a physical disposition that lusts after that pursues lust more than necessary, or like in an extreme way, is called a ben ksil, is called a foolish son. Uridifaso afra hataivos dima limidyane isha, and the pursuit of taivas is compared to a contentious woman. Shehi sibas harisas abayis, who causes the destruction of the household. So it's like he does bring destruction of the household here. That's what Isha means in as we've explained. I don't know where he's explaining it. There's a footnote. Vidima also Ladel Torah, and it compares her to a dripping again, I don't know how to say Torah here. Because with rain, the person hopes for benefit from it. Ukeshu Cain, but when it's dripping into his house, then it becomes a harm. Same thing with the bad woman, meaning with the chasing after taivas. Something to think about. I didn't work it out yet, but if you think of anything, we'll just post it in the chat.
Is like of the muscle.
Yeah.
Like rain is usually.
Oh yes, that's true. Right. Yeah, rain's great, just not in your house. Yeah. So taivas are great, but if you're caught in an addiction to a taiva, then that's not good.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a woman, woman is great. Or like the of a woman is great.
Right.
Like not too much.
Right. If it's being is a connecto, yeah. If it's being a nagging, then no. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Good. All right. That's good. Good pasuk. Yeah.
It's I don't know if Mishlei is associated in its order, but that is an association with the previous pasuk.
Remind me, what was the previous pasuk? Oh, the lion and
the tall.
yes, rain and tall. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. Rabbeinu Yonah holds it's associative, so definitely, yeah.
We went from Judah, right?
Yes. And I think the next pasuk is about marriage also.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that'll be for next week. All right. Let's stop here for today. Now, in terms